During the family reunion, my name tag did not say Helen Caldwell. It said, Robert's first wife, please ignore. For a moment, I thought my eyes had simply betrayed me. At 69, I had learned that grief could blur a room, that embarrassment could make the wallpaper tilt, that old memories could make a woman misread what was right in front of her. So I stood there at the registration table inside the Fairview Country Club in Columbus, Ohio, holding that little white card between my thumb and forefinger, and I read it again. Robert's first wife, please ignore. The young woman behind the table turned pink all the way to her ears. She could not have been more than 22, with a neat ponytail and a stack of alphabetized name tags in front of her. Mrs. Caldwell, she whispered, I'm so sorry. Maybe there's been a printing mistake. I looked past her shoulder into the ballroom, where the Caldwell family reunion was already shining like a magazine photograph. White tablecloths, blue hydrangeas, a banner that read 3 generations of Caldwell pride. Children ran between the chairs with paper cups of lemonade. Someone had set up a slideshow screen near the stage. The smell of barbecue drifted in from the patio, sweet and smoky, exactly the way Robert used to like it when we hosted these reunions in our backyard years ago. I had brought a peach cobbler wrapped in foil, still warm from my kitchen. I had made it because Robert once said no bakery in the state could beat mine. I should have known better than to trust a memory that old. I had not been invited warmly, not exactly. My son Michael had called 3 weeks earlier and said, Mom, you should come. It's time everyone moved forward. I had heard the carefulness in his voice, the way grown children speak when they want peace but not truth. Still, I bought a navy dress, had my silver hair trimmed, and drove 40 minutes with the cobbler balanced on the passenger seat like an offering. I told myself I was not going for Robert. I was not going for Patricia, the woman who now wore his last name as if she had carried its weight from the beginning. I was going because family history does not disappear just because someone remarries. Then I saw Lauren near the floral arrangement by the entrance. My daughter-in-law was wearing a cream-colored dress and a smile so polished it looked expensive. She was speaking to one of Robert's cousins, but her eyes flicked toward the name tag in my hand. Just for half a second. Long enough. The corner of her mouth lifted, not quite a smile, not enough for anyone else to accuse her of cruelty, but enough for me to understand. This was not a mistake. I could have handed the tag back. I could have asked for Michael. I could have walked out before anyone saw me standing there with my humiliation printed in black ink. Instead, I set my cobbler carefully on the table, peeled the backing off the plastic holder, and pinned the tag to the left side of my dress. My fingers were steady. That surprised me. The young woman behind the table looked as if she might cry for me. I almost comforted her, out of habit. Women my age are trained to soften the room, even when the room cuts us first. But I did not soften anything. I lifted my chin and walked into the ballroom. The first person to notice was Aunt Margaret, Robert's younger sister. Her smile vanished. Then 2 cousins stopped talking. A man I had known since Michael was in diapers glanced at my chest, then quickly looked away, as if ignoring the words would make them less real. That was the strangest part. No one laughed. No one defended me. They simply made room for the insult to exist. Michael stood near the stage, checking something on his phone. When he saw me, relief crossed his face first, then discomfort. His eyes dropped to the name tag. His jaw tightened. For one small second, I saw my little boy in him, the child who used to run to me when a thunderstorm shook the windows. Then Lauren appeared at his side and slipped her hand through his arm. The boy disappeared. Michael walked over slowly. Mom, he said under his breath, please don't make a scene. I looked at my son, then down at the words on my chest. I didn't print it, Michael. His face flushed. I know, but this is a big day for Dad. Patricia worked hard on this. Lauren too. Let's just get you another tag and move on. Move on. People say that when they are standing safely on the side that did the damage. Across the room, Robert Caldwell was laughing with Patricia beside him, her hand resting lightly on his sleeve. He looked older than the last time I had seen him, but not smaller. Men like Robert rarely became smaller in family stories. They became founders, providers, patriarchs. The women who stood beside them during the hard years became footnotes, then rumors, then mistakes people preferred not to discuss. I reached up and touched the edge of the name tag. No, I said quietly. I think I'll keep it on. Michael stared at me. Lauren's smile thinned. Around us, Conversations resumed too loudly, the way people talk when silence has become dangerous. I walked to an empty chair near the back, placed my purse beside me, and folded my hands in my lap. The tag rested against my dress like a small white flag that had surrendered nothing. If they wanted me invisible, I decided to let them look at exactly what they had done. The chair near the back gave me a perfect view of the room, which was both a kindness and a punishment. I could see everything without being asked to belong to any of it. The Fairview Country Club had polished every surface until the afternoon light bounced off silverware, water glasses, and framed family photographs arranged along the sidewall. There was Robert at 28, standing beside his first pickup truck with his sleeves rolled up and ambition in his eyes. There was Michael at age 6, missing his 2 front teeth, holding a baseball glove bigger than his face. There was a Christmas photograph from 1999, cropped so tightly that only my elbow remained beside the tree. I recognized the bracelet on that elbow. Robert had given it to me after our 10th anniversary, back when he still remembered dates without needing a reminder. A waitress passed with a tray of iced tea, and I took one glass just to have something to hold. My hands were still steady, but steadiness can be its own kind of exhaustion. Across the room, Patricia moved from group to group with the soft confidence of a woman who knew she had been placed in the center. She had a gentle voice, pearl earrings, and the practiced warmth of someone who never had to scrub barbecue sauce from folding tables after a family party ended. People called her Mrs. Caldwell, as if the title had always belonged to her. Each time I heard it, I felt nothing sharp at first, just a dull pressure behind my ribs, the kind that comes when an old bruise is pressed by accident. Lauren was everywhere. She adjusted place cards, corrected the photographer, whispered to the caterer, laughed with cousins she had met only a few years earlier. She had the talent of appearing helpful while controlling the shape of the room. When she passed my chair, she paused just long enough to glance at the tag pinned to my dress. "Helen," she said, sweet as powdered sugar, "I hope you found a comfortable seat. We try to keep the front tables for the current household and immediate family, just to avoid confusion." Current household, immediate family. The words were wrapped politely, but I heard what sat underneath them. I had slept in hospital chairs beside Robert's mother. I had mailed birthday cards to cousins who never sent one back. I had hosted Thanksgiving dinners for 23 people in a kitchen so small I had to cool pies on the washing machine. But one printed card and one younger woman's smile had pushed me to the back of the room like a coat no one wanted to claim. "This seat is fine," I said. Lauren tilted her head. "You are being so understanding. Michael was worried you might feel emotional today." There it was again. Emotional. A word used to make a woman's pain sound like poor manners. I looked at my daughter-in-law carefully. Her blonde hair was pinned in a low twist. Her dress had no wrinkles. Her smile did not reach her eyes. "Michael worries too much," I said. For the first time, her smile faltered. Only a little. Then she moved on. At the nearest table, 2 of Robert's cousins lowered their voices, but not enough. I did not even know she was coming. One of them murmured. Lauren said it was complicated. The other replied, "Well, divorce is always messy." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so cleanly wrong. Our divorce had not been messy. It had been quiet. I had signed papers in an office that smelled like copier toner and old coffee. I had taken the smaller house, the older car, and the silence Michael seemed to need from me. I had not told people about the years Robert came home late with apologies that sounded rehearsed. I had not corrected anyone when they said Patricia had brought out the best in him. I had chosen dignity over explanation. Now I watched dignity being mistaken for absence. Music began to play through the speakers, some cheerful old country song Robert used to hum while carving brisket in the backyard. The sound landed wrong in that polished room. It belonged to lawn chairs, paper plates, and children chasing fireflies after sunset. It belonged to a version of the Caldwell family that had once passed bowls of potato salad across my patio table while I refilled lemonade pitchers and Robert told the same stories every year. Back then, no one needed a banner to prove we were family. Then Michael walked to the stage and tapped the microphone. The room settled. Lauren stood beside him, holding a folder. Patricia took Robert's arm near the front table. I watched them form a neat little picture of belonging. Michael smiled at the crowd. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate the Caldwell legacy." The word legacy moved through the room like a door closing. I looked down at the name tag on my chest. For the first time that day, it felt less like an insult and more like evidence. Michael's voice carried through the ballroom with the smooth confidence he had learned from Robert. He thanked the cousins who had flown in from Texas, the aunt who had driven 3 hours from Indiana, the grandchildren who had helped decorate the patio. He thanked Patricia for bringing grace and unity into the Caldwell family. He thanked Lauren for organizing every detail with a heart for tradition. I listened to my own son speak about tradition while my peach cobbler sat untouched near the registration table, still wrapped in foil, cooling under fluorescent light. Not once did he look toward the back of the room. Not once did he say my name. Lauren stood beside the stage, holding her folder against her chest like a shield. Every few seconds, she glanced toward me, not with fear, but with measurement. She was checking whether the insult had worked, whether I looked small enough yet. When Michael finished, Lauren stepped forward and took the microphone. "Before dinner," she said brightly, "we wanted to share a little tribute to the Caldwell family story." The lights dimmed. The slideshow began. The first photograph showed Robert as a young man in front of the construction office, smiling beside a wooden sign that read Caldwell Construction. The room applauded. I stared at the image, remembering the morning that photograph was taken. Robert had forgotten his tie. I had driven 20 miles to bring it to him, with Michael asleep in his car seat and a checkbook in my purse that had already been stretched too thin. The next slide showed Robert shaking hands with his first major client. The caption read, "Robert Caldwell builds a future from nothing." From nothing. I felt my fingers curl around the cold glass of iced tea. That future had not been built from nothing. It had been built from the small inheritance my mother left me, from the home equity loan I signed when Robert's bank refused him, from years of dinners reheated at 10 at night because he was chasing contracts while I kept our life from collapsing. The slideshow moved on. There was Robert at company picnics, Robert at ribbon cuttings, Robert with Patricia at a charity luncheon, Patricia smiling beside a scholarship plaque I had helped fund before she ever entered the family. Then came a photograph from one of our old backyard reunions. I recognized the oak tree, the red cooler, the plastic tablecloth with tiny stars for the 4th of July weekend. But the photo had been cropped. Robert stood at the grill. Michael sat on the picnic table. Cousins crowded around them. My hand was visible at the edge, holding a pitcher of lemonade. Just my hand. Lauren's voice floated over the speakers. "As you can see, Robert has always been the center of this family." A few people clapped. Aunt Margaret did not. I saw her at the second table, her mouth pressed into a hard line. She looked at the screen, then at me. Her eyes were not pitying. They were angry. That helped more than pity would have. The tribute continued, each slide cleaner than the truth. I appeared only as a sleeve, a shoulder, half a face near the edge of a Christmas tree. When a full photograph of me finally appeared, the caption underneath said, "Robert's early years." Not wife, not mother, not partner. Early years. As if I had been a weather condition he eventually outgrew. Lauren paused after that slide. "Some chapters shape us," she said, looking directly toward the back of the room. "But not every chapter is meant to stay open forever." There was a soft murmur, the kind polite people make when they are embarrassed but not brave. Michael shifted his weight. Robert looked down at his program. Patricia touched her pearls. I sat still. My pulse was calm now. The first shock had passed. What remained was clarity. Lauren had not merely printed a cruel name tag. She had built an afternoon around erasing me carefully, tastefully, with flowers and captions and a microphone. She had made the room participate by giving everyone a comfortable version of the insult. Something they could call awkward instead of cruel. Something they could excuse as moving forward. I had spent years believing Lauren's coldness came from insecurity, from wanting her own place in the family, from the usual tensions that grow between a mother and a daughter-in-law when a son does not know how to love both without disappointing one. But this was not insecurity. This was strategy. She had not stumbled into cruelty. She had arranged it alphabetically, printed it on card stock, and placed it under soft lighting. When the slideshow ended, applause rose unevenly. Lauren smiled as if she had just given the family a gift. Then she handed the microphone back to Michael and walked down the steps. As she passed my row, she leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "You handled that better than I expected," she whispered. I looked up at her and saw the truth fully for the first time. Not a misunderstanding. Not a mistake. Not a family trying to heal clumsily. A campaign. Quiet. Polished. Deliberate. I set my untouched iced tea on the table beside me. So did you, I said. Lauren blinked. For once, she did not have a ready answer. For the first time that afternoon, I let myself remember the beginning instead of the insult. Memory is strange that way. It does not arrive politely. It opens a door without asking and lets the old rooms breathe again. While Lauren stood near the buffet accepting compliments for her tasteful tribute, I looked at the photograph still frozen on the screen, Robert in his younger years, smiling in front of a company he had supposedly built alone. I remembered the winter before that sign went up. We were living in a 2-bedroom rental on the east side of Columbus, with drafty windows and a furnace that rattled like it was begging to retire. Michael was 3, always running through the hallway in little socks, dragging a stuffed bear by one ear. Robert had dreams bigger than our bank account. He wanted trucks, crews, office space, equipment, permits, and a name people would remember. What he had was a used pickup, a toolbox, and a wife who believed him when belief still cost something. My mother had passed the year before and left me $11,000. It was not a fortune, but to me it felt sacred. She had worked as a school secretary for 34 years, packing the same ham sandwich in wax paper almost every morning, saving one careful dollar at a time. I had planned to put that money toward Michael's future or a small house with a yard where he could ride a bicycle. Robert sat across from me at our kitchen table one night with sketches, estimates, and that bright, hungry look he used to get when Hope had him by the collar. "Helen," he said, "if I can just get the first contracts, I can make this work." I wrote the check the next morning, not because I was foolish, because I was his wife, because marriage, back then, still meant building the bridge before you knew whether anyone would cross it. That first year, I kept the books at our dining table after Michael fell asleep. I learned invoices, payroll, receipts, insurance forms, and tax deadlines from library books and phone calls with patient clerks. I cleaned Robert's office on Sunday evenings because we could not afford a service. I packed his lunches in a red cooler and left notes inside when I knew a bid meeting had gone badly. When a client delayed payment and we were 2 weeks from losing everything, I signed the home equity paperwork on the little house we had finally bought. My name was on that risk. My signature sat beside his in blue ink. No slideshow had room for that. No caption ever said, "Helen kept the lights on." The family remembered Robert showing up with a new truck, Robert hiring his first crew, Robert buying a bigger house in a better school district. They did not remember me hemming Michael's pants by hand, because every spare dollar went into the business. They did not remember me making casseroles for employees whose wives were recovering from surgery, or answering the office phone with a baby on my hip, or driving across town in a snowstorm, because Robert left an important folder on the kitchen counter. Those things were not dramatic enough for legacy. They were just the hidden labor that made legacy possible. I looked around the ballroom and saw people eating from white plates, laughing under blue flowers, praising a family history polished clean of fingerprints like mine. Patricia had not lived through the fear of those early bank calls. Lauren had not seen Robert sit silently in the garage after losing a contract, too ashamed to come inside, until I carried coffee out and sat beside him without asking questions. Michael had been too young to know which parent made sure his baseball registration was paid, his lunch account full, his father's pride protected. I had protected Robert even during the divorce. Especially then. I allowed people to believe we had simply grown apart because that sounded gentler than the truth. I accepted the smaller settlement because Michael had just become a father, and I did not want him forced to choose sides while holding a newborn. I moved into a modest ranch house 12 miles away and told everyone I was fine. I was always fine. That was the costume I wore so no one else would feel uncomfortable. And now, years later, my reward for that silence was a name tag telling people to ignore me. Aunt Margaret appeared beside my chair so quietly I did not hear her approach. She lowered herself into the empty seat next to me, her knees stiff, her face pale with anger. "Helen," she said, barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something before Robert makes his announcement." I turned toward her. On the stage, Michael was laughing at something Patricia had said. Lauren was watching the room like a hostess guarding a secret. Margaret reached for my hand under the table and squeezed it hard. "This is about more than a reunion," she said. "They are announcing a family fund tonight. And Lauren made sure your name was removed from every piece of it." I felt the old Helen, the one who used to soften every blow, begin to recede. In her place came someone quieter, colder, more awake. Margaret leaned closer. Arthur Bennett still has the old files, she whispered. And Robert knows it. Margaret's words settled over me more heavily than the name tag ever had. A family fund. My name removed. Robert knowing the old files still existed. For a moment, the ballroom seemed to pull away from me, all its bright flowers and polished glasses becoming distant, like I was watching the room from the far end of a tunnel. Then the sound returned. Forks touching plates. Ice shifting in water glasses. Lauren's laugh near the buffet. Michael's voice thanking a cousin for coming. Ordinary sounds, wrapped around something carefully dishonest. I looked at Margaret's hand covering mine. Her fingers were thin now, the veins raised. The nails painted a pale pink that reminded me of church luncheons and sympathy cards. She had always been the blunt one in Robert's family. When we were young, she was the only Caldwell woman who would tell Robert he was being stubborn to his face. After the divorce, she sent me Christmas cards every year, even when others stopped. Sometimes she wrote only one sentence. Thinking of you. That had been enough. What kind of fund? I asked. Margaret glanced toward the stage before answering. The Caldwell Legacy Fund. Scholarships, community grants, donations through the company. It sounds beautiful from the outside. Her mouth tightened. But the announcement materials say it was created from Robert's lifelong work and Patricia's vision for giving back. Patricia's vision. I looked across the room at Patricia standing beside Robert, accepting praise with both hands folded over her heart. She was not cruel in the loud way Lauren was. Patricia's cruelty was softer. She accepted benefits from histories she did not live and called that grace. And Lauren arranged this? I asked. Margaret nodded. She has been working on it for months. Guest list, donor packets, slideshow, the little cards at each table. She told everyone you were invited as a courtesy because Michael insisted. There it was. Courtesy. Another polite word that could get a person cleanly. I reached for my purse and took out my reading glasses, not because I needed them yet, but because the small motion gave my hands something practical to do. Why tell me now? Margaret's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. Because I watched that slideshow. Because I saw your hand cropped out of your own life. Because Robert may have forgotten what you signed, but I did not. She leaned closer. Helen, Arthur Bennett told my husband years ago that there was a clause. Something about public use of the family trust history. Something Robert added during the divorce because he was afraid you might speak against the company. He thought it protected him. But I remember Arthur saying it protected you too. My heartbeat did not speed up. It slowed. That was how I knew something inside me had changed. Fear races. Clarity stands still. Do you have Arthur's number? I asked. Margaret opened her purse with trembling hands and pulled out a small paper address book. Not a phone app. Not a contact list. A real address book with worn corners and careful handwriting. She found the page and tapped the name Arthur Bennett with one finger. He retired, but he still answers for old clients. I copied the number into my phone. Across the ballroom, Lauren was now placing cream-colored envelopes at each table. Donor packets, I assumed. Each one had the Caldwell crest embossed in navy blue. A crest that had not existed when Robert and I were eating canned soup on winter nights to keep the business alive. Back then, the Caldwell name was not embossed. It was printed on invoices I mailed myself, licking stamps at midnight under a kitchen light that flickered when the furnace kicked on. I stood slowly. Margaret rose with me. Where are you going? She asked. Somewhere quieter. I carried my purse and walked toward the hallway near the coat room. No one stopped me. People rarely stop an older woman leaving a room. They assume she is tired, overwhelmed, in need of the restroom, or simply irrelevant. That assumption can be useful. The hallway was cooler than the ballroom, with framed golf photographs on the walls and a faint smell of carpet cleaner. I stood beneath a brass wall sconce and dialed Arthur Bennett's number. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice older but unmistakable. Bennett speaking. Arthur, this is Helen Caldwell. There was a pause. Not confusion. Recognition. Helen, he said gently. I wondered if this day might come. Those words told me more than any explanation could have. I looked down at the name tag still pinned to my dress. I am at the Caldwell reunion, I said. Robert is about to announce a legacy fund. My name has been removed from the materials. Publicly. Arthur exhaled slowly. I could hear papers rustling, as if old habits had made him reach for a file that might not even be near him. Did they use the company origin story? Yes. The family trust? According to Margaret, yes. And are they presenting Patricia as a founding figure? I looked through the open ballroom doors. Patricia was now posing for a photograph beside Robert and Michael. Lauren stood just behind them, smiling like the architect of a clean disappearance. That appears to be the intention. Arthur's voice changed. It became less gentle, more precise. The lawyer returning to the room. Helen, there is a signed acknowledgement from Robert dated the day before your divorce was finalized. It states that any public representation of Caldwell Construction, the Caldwell Family Trust, or derivative charitable entities must not materially misrepresent your financial and administrative contribution to their formation. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not from weakness, from recognition. My life had not vanished. It had been filed. Can you send it to me? I asked. Along with the original contribution records? I can send scanned copies within a few minutes. Then he paused. Helen, may I ask what happened? I touched the edge of the plastic badge. They told people to ignore me. Arthur was silent. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. Then I suggest you let them finish speaking first. For the first time all day, I almost smiled. That was my thought exactly. Arthur's email arrived while I was still standing in the hallway beneath the brass wall sconce. My phone gave one soft chime, no louder than a spoon touching china, but it felt like the whole country club had gone still to hear it. I opened the message and saw 3 attachments. The first was labeled Original Capital Contribution. The second, Administrative Records and Payroll Authorization. The third, Signed Acknowledgement, Robert Caldwell. My name sat there in black and white. Not as memory, not as opinion, not as some emotional version of the past that could be dismissed at a buffet table. It sat there as fact. I put on my reading glasses and opened the first document. The scan showed my old handwriting, careful and narrow, from a time when I still dotted every letter like my 3rd grade teacher had taught me. $11,000 from my mother's estate, transferred to Caldwell Construction startup account. I remembered the bank lobby where I signed it. Brown carpet, a glass bowl of peppermints. Michael sleeping against my shoulder while Robert bounced his knee so hard the loan officer kept glancing under the desk. I opened the second attachment. Payroll records, vendor checks, office lease deposits. My signatures appeared again and again, steady little marks left by a younger woman who never imagined she would one day need proof that she had existed. The third document took longer to load. I watched the spinning circle on my screen and listened to the muffled applause from the ballroom. Robert must have been preparing to speak. Lauren must have been pleased with herself. Patricia must have been smoothing her dress, ready to stand in soft lighting as the graceful face of generosity. Then the final document opened. Arthur had highlighted one paragraph in yellow. I read it twice. Any public charitable, historical, promotional, or family trust representation materially derived from the formation and growth of Caldwell Construction shall acknowledge Helen Caldwell's foundational financial and administrative contribution, and shall not present such formation as solely attributable to Robert Caldwell or any subsequent spouse. I stood there until the words stopped looking legal and started looking simple. They could not build a legacy on my erasure. Not legally. Not truthfully. Not today. Margaret stepped into the hallway, looking both anxious and determined. Did he send it? She asked. I turned the phone toward her. She read the highlighted paragraph, and her shoulders dropped as if she had been holding her breath for years. Good, she whispered. Good. From inside the ballroom, Michael tapped the microphone again. If everyone could take their seats, Dad and Patricia are ready to share something very special. Margaret looked toward the doors. What are you going to do? I removed my glasses and folded them slowly. Nothing yet. She stared at me. Helen, Arthur said to let them finish speaking first. Margaret's face changed. The anger remained, but now there was something like admiration beneath it. You always were more patient than the rest of us. No, I said, slipping the phone into my purse. I was trained to be patient. There is a difference. We walked back into the ballroom together. I did not hurry. At 69, I had learned that walking slowly into a room could unsettle people more than storming into it. A storm gives everyone a reason to protect themselves. Calm makes them wonder what you know. As I returned to my seat, Lauren noticed me first. Her eyes dropped to my purse, then to my face. She must have expected tears from the hallway. Red eyes. A trembling mouth. some visible sign that her afternoon had landed exactly where she aimed it. Instead, I sat down, placed my purse on my lap, and looked toward the stage. Her expression tightened. Robert stood at the microphone with Patricia beside him. Michael was to his left. Lauren moved to the side of the stage, folder in hand, ready to guide the performance she had designed. Behind them, the projector displayed a navy blue slide with silver lettering. The Caldwell Legacy Fund. Built on family. Built on faith. Built by Robert Caldwell. There it was. Not a misunderstanding. Not an omission. A sentence polished into a lie. Robert began with the voice he used at Chamber of Commerce breakfasts, warm and practiced. He spoke about humble beginnings, long hours, faith in hard work, and the importance of giving back. People nodded. Some smiled. An older cousin wiped her eyes. I watched Robert's hands as he spoke. They moved with the same confidence they had when he used to explain risk to me at our kitchen table, always making uncertainty sound like destiny, if only I would sign one more form. Patricia leaned toward the microphone next. She spoke about compassion, scholarships for local students, helping families who needed a fresh start. Her words were lovely. That made them worse. Lovely words can cover a great deal when no one asks what is underneath. Then Lauren stepped forward with the donor packets. Each table has information about how to honor Robert and Patricia's vision, she said. This fund represents the heart of the Caldwell family as it stands today. As it stands today? I looked at the name tag on my dress. I looked at the crop photographs. I looked at my son, standing near the stage, proud and uneasy at the same time. My phone rested in my purse with Arthur's documents waiting like a quiet witness. For years, I had believed truth needed the right moment to survive. That afternoon, I realized the right moment is often the one your enemies create for themselves. Robert smiled at the room and said, "This legacy began with one man, one dream, and the family that believed in him." I stood up. I stood so quietly that, at first, only the people at the tables nearest me noticed. A cousin turned in his chair. A child stopped swinging her feet under the table. Margaret rose beside me, not fully, just enough to make it clear I was not alone. On the stage, Robert continued speaking for 2 more words before his eyes found me. His mouth stayed slightly open. Patricia's hand tightened around the edge of the podium. Lauren's expression changed faster than anyone else's. Not fear. Not yet. Irritation. She looked at Michael, silently ordering him to handle me before I disturbed the picture she had spent months arranging. Michael stepped down from the side of the stage and walked toward me with the strained smile people use in public when they are privately embarrassed. "Mom," he said softly, "can this wait?" I looked at him. My son was 42 years old, tall, well-dressed, successful in the way Robert respected. But in that moment, I saw the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and ask if they were enough to make a bouquet. I love that boy. I still love the man. But love does not require a mother to disappear on command. "No," I said. One word. Not loud. Not sharp. Just complete. Michael stopped. The room had grown quiet enough that someone setting down a fork near the front sounded careless. I walked past him toward the stage. Each step felt measured, almost ordinary. My knees ached, as they often did after sitting too long, and one of my shoes pinched at the heel. Small human details. Proof that dignity does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it walks slowly across a banquet hall in uncomfortable shoes. Lauren moved toward the microphone before I reached it. "Helen," she said brightly, trying to pour sugar over panic. "We would love to include your thoughts later during the family memory portion." I smiled at her. Not warmly. Not cruelly. "This is the family memory portion." A few people inhaled at once. Robert looked down at the podium. He knew that tone. He had heard it only a handful of times in our marriage, usually after he had mistaken my quiet for permission. I stepped onto the low stage and held out my hand. Lauren did not give me the microphone. She glanced at Michael again. Then Margaret's voice came from the second table, clear as a church bell. "Give her the microphone, Lauren." That broke something in the room. Not dramatically, just enough. Lauren handed it to me with 2 fingers, as if my composure might stain her. I took it and turned toward the crowd. Dozens of faces looked back at me. Some curious, some uncomfortable, some ashamed in advance, though they did not yet know why. I reached up with my free hand and unpinned the name tag from my dress. The little plastic edge caught briefly on the fabric, then came loose. I held it up. For those seated too far away to read it, I said, "This is the name tag I was given when I arrived today." Michael closed his eyes. Patricia stared at Lauren. Robert did not move. I brought the tag closer to the microphone and read the words exactly as they had been printed. My voice did not shake. When I finished, the silence was no longer polite. It was heavy. It had weight. It sat on every white tablecloth in the room. Lauren recovered first, or tried to. "That was an unfortunate joke that should have been corrected at registration," she said. "No one meant any harm." I looked at her. "Then who printed it?" Her face held. "Barely. I am sure it was a volunteer error." "The young woman at registration looked more ashamed than anyone in this family," I said. "So I do not think we should give her credit for work she did not do." A low murmur moved through the tables. Lauren's cheeks colored. Robert cleared his throat. "Helen, this is not the time." I turned to him then. The man whose dream I had funded. The man whose pride I had protected. The man now standing beneath a slide that had turned my life into empty space. "Robert," I said, "you built a stage on my silence. You do not get to complain when I finally speak on it." No one applauded. No one needed to. I set the name tag flat on the podium in front of him. Then I reached into my purse and took out my phone. A few minutes ago, I received documents from Arthur Bennett. Robert's face changed. It was small, but I saw it. So did Margaret. So did Lauren, though she did not understand it yet. "Arthur," Patricia whispered. The name moved through the room like an old drawer opening. I looked toward the projector beside the stage. "Michael," I said, "you are good with technology. Please connect my phone to the screen." He stared at me, torn between son and host, between truth and comfort. Then, slowly, he walked to the projector table. Lauren stepped toward him. "Michael, do not." That was when everyone looked at her. Not at me. Not at the name tag. At her. Michael paused, then continued. A moment later, the navy blue slide disappeared, and Arthur Bennett's email appeared on the screen behind us. The email on the screen was plain, almost disappointingly plain. No dramatic seal. No bold red warning. Just Arthur Bennett's name, a timestamp, and 3 attachments displayed against the white projection screen where Robert's tribute had been moments earlier. That plainness gave it power. Lies often arrive dressed beautifully. Truth is comfortable in a simple font. I heard someone near the back whisper Arthur's name. Most of the older relatives remembered him. He had handled Robert's business contracts, our divorce papers, and several estate matters for the Caldwell family over the years. He was not a stranger with an opinion. He was the man who had kept the paper trail when everyone else preferred the polished story. Michael stood beside the projector table, his hand still on the cable, his face pale in the blue light. "Mom," he said quietly, "what is this?" "The part of the legacy presentation that was left out," I said. I opened the first attachment. The scan filled the screen, slightly crooked, showing the original capital contribution record from the first year of Caldwell construction. My name appeared beside the transfer amount. $11,000. It looked small on that large screen, almost modest, but I remembered how enormous it had felt then. It had been my mother's years of careful savings. It had been the money I thought might buy a safer car, or a better crib, or a small cushion against the world. Instead, it became Robert's first real chance. The room stayed silent as I read the line aloud. Initial operating funds transferred from Helen Caldwell's personal inheritance. I did not embellish it. I did not explain my mother's ham sandwiches or the bank's brown carpet or the way Robert's hands shook with hope that morning. I let the sentence stand by itself. Patricia looked at Robert, waiting for him to deny it. He did not. I opened the second attachment. Payroll authorizations. Vendor payments. Office lease deposit. My signature appeared again, then again, then again. The projector enlarged the blue ink until every curve of my younger handwriting seemed to take up the whole room. For the first 2 years, I said, I kept the books, handled payroll, paid vendors, answered office calls, and signed financial documents when the company had no administrative staff. A cousin at the front table leaned closer to the screen. Someone murmured, I did not know that. Of course they did not. I had not told them. Back then, I thought devotion did not need witnesses. That was one of the mistakes women are praised for while they are making it. Lauren stepped forward, her folder clutched too tightly. No one is saying you were not supportive, Helen. Every wife supports her husband in some way. Every wife. Some way. She tried to shrink signatures into sentiment. I looked at her, Then at the screen. Support is bringing coffee to a meeting. This is collateral, capital, labor, and legal risk. Arthur would have appreciated the precision. Lauren's mouth closed. I opened the third attachment, and the highlighted paragraph filled the screen. Robert made a small sound behind me. Not a word. Just recognition escaping before pride could stop it. I read the paragraph slowly, because the room needed every word. Any public charitable, historical, promotional, or family trust representation materially derived from the formation and growth of Caldwell Construction shall acknowledge Helen Caldwell's foundational financial and administrative contribution, and shall not present such formation as solely attributable to Robert Caldwell or any subsequent spouse. The phrase any subsequent spouse landed softly, then spread. Patricia's face changed. Not with anger at me. With the first visible understanding that she had been placed in a story that already had legal borders. Robert gripped the edge of the podium. Helen, he said, that document was never meant for this. I turned toward him. No, Robert. It was meant for exactly this. You just hoped this would never happen in front of people. The room inhaled as one body. Michael looked at his father, then at me, then back at the screen. I saw pieces moving behind his eyes. Memories rearranging themselves. The late nights. The business trips. The careful way I never corrected Robert at family dinners. The modest house I accepted after the divorce. The way I always said, your father worked hard, and never added, so did I. Lauren tried again, softer this time. This was supposed to be a positive family event. I nodded. Then why did it require erasing part of the family? She had no answer. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of every cropped photograph, every careful omission, every polite phrase that had been used to make me smaller. Margaret stood at her table. I remember Helen in that office, she said. I remember her balancing account books while Michael slept in a playpen. Another cousin slowly nodded. Then another. Memory, once invited, began returning to the room. Robert stared at the name tag lying on the podium between us. It looked cheap now. Not clever. Not funny. Just cheap. I picked it up and held it beside the legal document glowing behind me. Lauren wanted this room to ignore me, I said. Instead, she gave everyone a reason to look closely. Michael lowered his head. Patricia stepped away from Robert by half a foot. Lauren's polished smile was gone completely. And for the first time all afternoon, my name was not the uncomfortable part of the story. Their silence was. For a while, no one moved. The ballroom that had been so carefully arranged for celebration now felt like a room waiting for permission to breathe. The blue hydrangeas still sat in their glass vases. The donor packets still rested on the tables. The silver letters of the Caldwell Legacy Fund still gleamed on the folders, but they no longer looked elegant to me. They looked premature. Robert turned away from the microphone and lowered his voice, as if privacy could be recovered after truth had already filled the screen. Helen, we should discuss this somewhere else. I almost smiled at that. For years, everything important had been discussed somewhere else. In offices, in hallways, in lowered voices, in agreements no one at family dinners ever saw. My labor had happened somewhere else too, behind invoices, behind kitchen doors, behind Robert's public confidence. I looked at him and said, no, this is the room where you chose to present the story. This is the room where it will be corrected. Patricia folded her hands in front of her, pearls resting against her collarbone, her face pale but composed. I did not hate her. That surprised me. I had spent enough years carrying old pain to recognize that she was not the root of this particular wound. She had accepted a crown without asking who had paid for the velvet. That was wrong, but it was not the oldest wrong in the room. Lauren was the one who spoke next. This has gotten completely out of proportion, she said, her voice thin now. It was a name tag. A bad joke. We can apologize and move on. Move on. Again, that tidy little phrase people use when they are tired of being accountable. I picked up the name tag from the podium and held it between two fingers. A joke is something everyone is allowed to laugh at, I said. This was an instruction. No one contradicted me. Michael stood near the projector table, still looking at the documents on the screen. My son looked older than he had that morning. Not in his face, exactly, but in the way he carried himself, as if a weight had just been handed to him and he was only beginning to understand its shape. Mom, he said, and this time the word did not sound like a warning. It sounded like a question. I turned to him. I need you to hear me clearly, Michael. I did not come here to take your father's name away from him. I did not come to embarrass Patricia. I did not even come to punish Lauren. Lauren looked down at the carpet. I came because I was invited to a family reunion and told, in writing, to disappear. My voice stayed even. That mattered to me. Anger would have made them comfortable. Anger would have allowed them to call me unstable, bitter, dramatic, all the soft little cages built for older women who finally refused to be convenient. So I gave them facts instead. The fun materials will be corrected before they are distributed. The slideshow will be removed. Any public announcement about Caldwell Construction, the Family Trust, or this charitable fund will include the contribution language from Arthur Bennett's document. And the person responsible for that name tag will send a written apology to every guest in this room. Lauren's head snapped up. That is humiliating. I looked at her for a long second. Yes. One word. Enough. Margaret made a small sound beside her table, almost a laugh, almost a sigh. Robert rubbed a hand over his face. He had the look of a man realizing that the cost of silence had finally come due with interest. Patricia stepped toward the microphone, surprising everyone. Helen, she said quietly, I did not know about the documents. I believed her, not because she deserved my trust, but because her shock had arrived too late to be staged. Now you do, I said. She nodded once. Then she looked at Robert, and something between them shifted. Not loudly, but enough. Michael walked up to the stage slowly. He did not reach for me right away, which I appreciated. Some apologies are ruined when they arrive too quickly. I should have stopped it when I saw the tag, he said. His voice was low, but the microphone caught it. I am sorry. I looked at my son and felt the ache of all the years between us. An apology does not rebuild a bridge in one sentence. But sometimes it places the first board. I know, I said. And we will talk later. Later. Not forgiveness. Not rejection. Just a door left unlocked, not wide open. I removed the name tag from its plastic sleeve and placed the paper on top of Lauren's donor packet. The black letters faced upward. Robert's first wife. Please ignore. Keep this, I said to her. It is the most honest thing you prepared today. Then I stepped away from the microphone. I did not wait for applause, though a few people began clapping uncertainly, then stopped when they realized this was not a performance meant to make them feel better. I walked down from the stage with my purse on my arm and my shoulders straight. Margaret joined me near the aisle. At the registration table, my peach cobbler still sat untouched, the foil loosened at one corner. I picked it up. It was cool now, but still mine. As I reached the door, Robert called my name. Not Mrs. Caldwell. Not an old title. Just Helen. I paused, but I did not turn around. There was a time when that voice could have pulled me back across any room. That time had passed quietly, without ceremony. Outside, the Ohio evening was soft and gold over the parking lot. I breathed in the smell of cut grass, car exhaust, and summer rain gathering somewhere beyond the clouds. I walked to my car alone, but not lonely. I had entered that country club as a woman they expected to erase with a joke, a cropped photograph, and a polite smile. I left with my name intact, my history restored, and the calm certainty that I was never the footnote in Robert Caldwell's story. I was Helen Caldwell, the woman who helped write the first page, and the woman who finally refused to be edited out of the last one.